Hi, welcome to another Canto Roboflow training movie. In this training movie, I'm going to show you in Cumulus 9 how to import the site's action log files and import them in an SQL database and periodically create a report on the number of logins per user. The log file that Sites out of the box creates looks something like this, where you have a date timestamp, what kind of action was performed, who was connecting, and if it was successful. There are other actions in here, but the focus of this particular workflow is on that connection. How many times did a user connect in a certain period? Then I created an SQL database using the standard McCoy, but you can do MySQL, SQL Server, whatever. Created a little table that has user login, a date, a time, an action name, and some action details. So in reality it looks something like this, where the username, the date, the time, the type of action is logged, and the action details being connected in this case. And then finally in the report I will do a count of the number of logins per user grouped by that user, ordered by that user within a certain period. How do we do that in Roboflow? Well, first of all, in my Roboflow folder I added the database, I created the database, the SQL database, and then there are some folders that I will be using. You don't have to create them, the workflow creates them themselves, with the exception of this drop folder sites action log. I installed on my computer a daily Windows task schedule that automatically copies the sites-actions.log at midnight to just before midnight to this folder, and then 5 minutes after midnight I run this import workflow, which then imports that tab limited that's not a tab limited text file, but it's a text file. So I use a hot folder template workflow for that, and in the parameters I look at that particular drop folder. I only process files.log, and I added an additional parameter which I call the target folder log processed, which is the folder where I copy the log to once it is processed, so that I can keep track of the files that are imported. And worst case scenario, if my SQL database breaks down, I could always re-import those same log files and have the same result. In the action script, I'm storing the folder, the target folder, so that I'm sure that the target folder exists. I copy the log file to it, and actually I give it a new name with date, time, and then sites login. So I copy there, and then I read. I have an action that reads that file. It reads that text file, and it stores it in a table, an internal table. And in that internal table, then I open my SQL database, and here I process at that point the row. I'm saying give me the first column. Actually this text file has only one column, and I store it as my row, and then I start parsing it. I extract the date, the time, and I extract the action, I extract the user, and I extract the details. When all that is done, and if the details equals connected, because in this example I only want the connected ones to be stored in the SQL database, I perform an SQL query, and that SQL query is then the one you saw a couple of minutes ago, which here contains the user that I selected, the date, the time. I prefixed it with a colon SQL colon, which makes sure that there are no invalid SQL characters in there like a quote, so it would clean that up, and that's just a simple SQL statement. So, and finally I close, of course, my SQL database. That's a very straightforward and very easy workflow. Then I end up with an SQL database, and that SQL database can be queried. I can schedule, for instance, this watch SQL template workflow, and by scheduling it, I could run it, for instance, every first day of the month, or every last day of the month, or every Monday or every Sunday, and then have a predefined time schedule. What does it have? Well, it has a connection string to that SQL database, which is just a pretty straightforward, easy McCoy database, but as I said, it could be SQL Server or MySQL. We have the SQL statement, which does a select and then a count of the number of logins per user. It groups by user, it orders by user, but the most important part in this SQL statement is here. I added two parameters, a from date parameter and a to date parameter. Why did I do that? Well, I want to offer the user the opportunity to quickly come in here and put some start and stop dates. And by default, it will take up to today, and it will not use today, because it says here today is smaller than the log date. So it doesn't use today. If you run the workflow today, it will contain everything from yesterday. That's, I think, the better thing to do, because today is not finished, so it could be an incomplete sum. And then in this example, I'm doing today -8 for the last 7 days. Why -8? Because I want today not to count, so it calculates it like that. And I do take the start date, which is then the date from it's 7 days ago, so today -8. But you could come in here and say hard-coded, I want to change this into a fixed date. The format is explained here. For instance, you can say 2014-05-15, and then it would take that as a from date, and the from date is included, and the to date maybe till today, or whatever other date you want to specify. In that case, you would specify here, for instance, 2015-0101. Always remember year, month, day. Once you've set that up, you can run the workflow. As I said, the workflow could be configured to run on demand, which means that you come to the Roboflow workflow website and you click on the start date here. Start, or you can if it's running on a time interval, could be that it is scheduled to run every Monday morning or every so many days or whatever, then you should stop it, you should edit it, make the changes and save and start it again. Don't forget to come back in and put it back to its original parameters, because you do want to keep probably the repeated reporting on a prefixed time period as well. What does the workflow itself look like? Very straightforward. When we process the loop, it tests for the first loop. So actually I should give this a proper name. Test if first item of loop. Always try to make your variables as readable as possible. And then we can save this. What this does is, if this is the first item of the SQL result, it will try to create the export folder. The export folder that you are able to set up in this workflow here. The target folder is at this point in the application folder of Roboflow, /target folder report, which is here. And then here in the workflow, it tries to create that export folder, that export file. The export file will have the from date to date with a date timestamp and a .txt attached to it. So that's how it creates the empty file. Then in an SQL workflow, the row is presented as a table object to the workflow. So I'm storing the elements of that row per row. I'm storing that row as stored text, which means that in the SQL statement I stated that my first element would be called user login and my second is called, that's why I do the cast, sum1. So here, and be careful, it uses underscores, undercast, lowercase. So if I'm writing this to the log to know what went into the report, user login, all under lowercase, and sum. I'm storing this as a text line that I will write to the report, and I'm saying here append, and that's how it's going to create my report. So if I and what does this workflow do at the end? Because I specified an email address, it will send an email. The syntax of the email is here, sites login report, and then you have here a text. Below you find the Cumulus Sites login per user, from date, which is included, blah, and then to date, that I could say not included to make it clear, and then it specifies the tag, and then it will list here, this is what is always replaced by this part, so it will list the individual records, and underneath I specified this, which means that it will pick up email file tag, it will attach that export file that we created to this mail. I'm saying okay and save and okay, and if I run now the workflow, it will give me a report of the last 7 days, and it you can find that information here in the log. If you have a look in the log, you can see it found 2 records, one for a user called buser who logged in 44 times, and another user called Peter who logged in once. And it says an email and a file was sent to Peter at localhost. So if I check my mail, here's the account. This is the report I get. I get the mail. I get the information inside the mail, the individual counts, and attached is the text file that I could open in Excel if this is a big one, and in Excel I could do whatever I like to create statistical reports. So this was another example of how to use Roboflow to create reports based on the number of logins per user in Cumulus Sites. Could be used for any of the other logs as well, or any of the other actions that are logged. We have examples where we read out the native Cumulus logs as well. Just check out the training movies or contact me. Thank you for joining, and see you in another movie.